Hey guys, tonight we're diving into one of the ocean's most hypnotic mysteries, where creatures without brains somehow choreograph movements that would make a mathematician weep with joy. Picture this: you're floating in the open ocean at twilight, the water around you thick with thousands of jellyfish moving in perfect formation, like living crystals drifting through liquid space. The sight is so mesmerizing you forget you're holding your breath, which, by the way, you definitely wouldn't survive this deep without some serious equipment. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing how this underwater world connects us all across different time zones. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself suspended in the twilight zone of the Pacific, watching what scientists call the most elegant mathematical display in nature. Thousands of moon jellies pulse around you in spiraling formations, their translucent bells catching the last rays of sunlight filtering down from above. Each creature moves with purpose despite having no brain, no central nervous system, nothing resembling what we'd call intelligence. Yet here they are, following patterns so precise that researchers have spent decades trying to decode their secret language. The water temperature drops as you descend deeper, following this living constellation. You notice how the jellyfish maintain exact distances from one another, never colliding, never breaking formation. It's like watching a slow-motion ballet performed by ghosts. Their movements create gentle currents that ripple outward, and you realize these currents are carrying information. Invisible messages passed from creature to creature across miles of open water. Marine biologists first noticed these patterns in the 1970s, when underwater cameras revealed massive jellyfish aggregations moving in perfect geometric shapes, circles within circles, spirals that seemed to follow the golden ratio, formations that resembled the mathematical constants found in flower petals and nautilus shells. The implications were staggering. How could brainless creatures organize themselves according to principles that human mathematicians had only recently discovered? You drift closer to observe individual jellies, their bell-shaped bodies pulsing in rhythmic contractions that propel them forward. Each pulse sends ripples through the water, and you notice other jellyfish responding to these vibrations with subtle adjustments to their own movements. The ocean becomes a vast communication network, with pressure waves carrying messages about direction, speed, and intent. Ancient myths spoke of sea spirits that could predict storms and guide sailors home. Perhaps they were witnessing these very same formations without understanding the science behind the magic. Researchers still argue about whether jellyfish swarms represent true collective intelligence or simply sophisticated responses to environmental cues. Some scientists believe these creatures possess a form of distributed consciousness, where the group becomes smarter than the sum of its parts. Others maintain that the patterns emerge from basic physical laws, water currents, and chemical gradients, creating the illusion of purposeful behavior. As darkness settles over the ocean, bioluminescent flashes begin to sparkle throughout the swarm, like underwater fireworks. The jellyfish are communicating through light now, creating patterns of illumination that pulse and fade in waves across the formation. You watch this living galaxy drift past, each creature following ancient programming written in their genes, navigation instructions passed down through millions of years of evolutionary refinement. The mathematics of their movement speaks to something deeper than conscious thought, a fundamental harmony between life and the physical laws that govern our universe. You follow the glowing constellation deeper into the midnight zone, where sunlight becomes nothing more than a distant memory, and the jellyfish begin to reveal their most remarkable secret. These creatures that emerged from the primordial soup hundreds of millions of years ago carry within their simple bodies a navigation system that puts modern GPS to shame. Without eyes to see stars or brains to process complex calculations, they somehow plot courses across entire ocean basins with pinpoint accuracy. The water grows colder as you descend, and you notice subtle changes in the swarm's behavior. Individual jellyfish begin adjusting their positions relative to magnetic fields you cannot see or feel, but which permeate every drop of seawater around you. Earth's magnetic field lines run like invisible highways through the ocean, and these ancient mariners read them as easily as you might follow road signs on a familiar route home. You watch a cluster of barrel jellyfish, each one the size of a small car, as they orient themselves along north-south axis with mechanical precision. Their bodies contain microscopic crystals of magnetite, the same iron-rich mineral that guides migrating birds and sea turtles. These biological compasses allow them to sense magnetic declination, the angle between true north and magnetic north, adjusting their heading accordingly as they traverse vast distances. Marine researchers discovered this magnetic sensitivity through painstaking observation of tagged jellyfish populations. Individuals, released thousands of miles apart, would converge on the same feeding grounds with clockwork regularity, suggesting they possessed internal maps far more sophisticated than anything humans had imagined. The jellies seemed to know not only where they were going, but when they needed to arrive, timing their journeys to coincide with seasonal blooms of plankton and optimal breeding conditions. The current around you shifts direction, and you notice the entire swarm responding within minutes. They're reading water temperature, salinity levels, and chemical signatures that tell them which currents will carry them toward their destination and which will lead them astray. Ocean currents form a three-dimensional highway system, with express lanes in the surface waters and slower local routes in the depths. The jellyfish choose their paths like experienced commuters, taking shortcuts through thermal layers and riding deep water upwellings and to conserve energy. Ancient Polynesian navigators told stories of jellyfish that could predict weather patterns and point the way to distant islands. Modern science has revealed these tales contained more truth than folklore. Jellyfish swarms often precede seasonal changes in ocean circulation, moving toward areas where nutrient-rich waters will soon create feeding opportunities. Their movement patterns serve as early warning systems for environmental shifts that won't become apparent to human observers for weeks or months. You drift alongside a particularly large specimen, its translucent body pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that seem to flicker in response to magnetic field variations. Researchers still argue about whether jellyfish can actually perceive magnetic fields directly, or if they're responding to secondary effects like pressure changes caused by the interaction between seawater and Earth's magnetic field. Some scientists propose that their entire nervous system, simple as it is, functions as a biological magnetometer capable of detecting field variations smaller than those measured by our most sensitive instruments. The swarm begins to change direction again, and you realize you're witnessing navigation decisions being made in real time across thousands of individuals simultaneously. Each jellyfish processes information about magnetic bearing, water chemistry, current speed and temperature, then adjusts its swimming pattern to maintain formation while following the optimal route. It's like watching a living computer network solve complex routing problems through distributed processing, each node contributing to calculations that benefit the entire system. You notice something extraordinary happening as the swarm adjusts to the new current direction. The jellyfish aren't just moving randomly, but arranging themselves in a pattern that makes your skin tingle with recognition. The formation spirals outward from a central cluster, each ring containing roughly 1.618 times more individuals than the ring inside it. You're witnessing the golden ratio unfold in living flesh, the same mathematical constant that appears in sunflower seeds, nautilus shells, and the arrangement of leaves on a stem. The Fibonacci sequence reveals itself as you count the jellyfish in each spiral arm. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. Each number represents the sum of the two preceding it, a pattern so fundamental to nature that ancient mathematicians believed it held the secret to divine proportion. Here in the depths of the ocean, creatures that predate human civilization by hundreds of millions of years demonstrate this mathematical principle with unconscious perfection. You drift closer to the center of the formation, where the largest individuals pulse in slow hypnotic rhythms. These appear to be the matriarchs, ancient specimens whose size suggests decades of survival in the open ocean. They occupy the focal point of the spiral, their movements creating pressure waves that ripple outward through the formation like commands issued from a living command center. The smaller jellyfish respond to these signals by adjusting their positions, maintaining the mathematical precision of the overall pattern. Marine biologists studying these formations have discovered that the spiral arrangement maximizes feeding efficiency while minimizing energy expenditure. Each individual occupies a position that gives it optimal access to passing prey while avoiding competition with its neighbors. The mathematical beauty serves a practical purpose. The golden ratio represents the most efficient way to pack living organisms into a given space while allowing each one room to hunt and reproduce. The spiral begins to tighten as the swarm encounters a thermocline, a sharp boundary between warm surface water and the frigid depths below. You feel the temperature drop, hit your body like a wall of ice, but the jellyfish seem perfectly adapted to these transitions. They compress their formation, the spiral coiling more tightly as they navigate through the thermal barrier. The Fibonacci pattern holds even under stress, proving its effectiveness as an organizational principle for group survival. You remember the whale songs from earlier expeditions, how those massive mammals also use mathematical patterns in their communication. The ocean seems filled with hidden geometry, from the helical structure of currents to the fractal patterns of coral growth. The jellyfish spiral represents another piece of this aquatic symphony, a visual representation of the mathematical laws that govern life itself. Researchers still argue about whether these patterns emerge from genetic programming or environmental pressures. Some believe the spiral formation is hardwired into jellyfish DNA, an evolutionary adaptation refined over millions of years. Others suggest the pattern emerges spontaneously from the physical properties of water and the behavioral responses of individual creatures to their neighbors. The truth probably lies somewhere between these extremes, with natural selection favoring individuals whose movements contribute to mathematically optimal group formations. As the spiral completes another revolution, you notice smaller eddies forming along its edges, where individual jellyfish break away to pursue prey or investigate chemical signals. These departures don't disrupt the overall pattern. Instead, they create new mini-spirals that mirror the structure of the main formation. It's like watching fractals unfold in real time, patterns within patterns, repeating at every scale from individual organisms to the entire swarm. The mathematical precision extends beyond just spatial arrangement. The timing of the jellyfish pulses follows rhythmic patterns that create standing waves throughout the formation. These pressure waves carry information about food sources, predator threats, and optimal swimming directions, allowing the swarm to function as a single superorganism with thousands of sensory inputs and processing centers. You find yourself at the heart of something that shouldn't exist, millions of individual minds working together without a single leader or master plan, yet creating behaviors so complex they make human cities look primitive by comparison. Each jellyfish around you possesses a nervous system simpler than the average earthworm, just a basic nerve net that can detect light, pressure, and chemicals, yet collectively they're solving navigation problems that would challenge our most advanced computers. The swarm pulses around you like a single breathing organism, each individual responding to signals from its neighbors in a cascade of communication that ripples through the entire formation within seconds. You watch a disturbance at the edge of the group, perhaps a predator or an unexpected current, and marvel as the information spreads inward through thousands of creatures. The response isn't panic, but coordinated adjustment. The spiral tightens in threatened areas while expanding in safe zones, creating a dynamic defense system that protects the vulnerable center. This collective intelligence emerges from surprisingly simple rules that each jellyfish follows unconsciously. Stay close enough to your neighbors to share information, but far enough away to avoid collisions. Move toward areas where chemical signals indicate abundant food. Avoid regions where stress pheromones suggest danger. When thousands of individuals follow these basic principles simultaneously, the result is behavior that appears planned and purposeful despite arising from pure instinct. Marine researchers studying these swarms often compare them to flocks of birds or schools of fish, but the jellyfish version operates on a completely different level of complexity. Birds and fish have sophisticated brains capable of rapid decision-making and memory formation. Jellyfish work with neural equipment so primitive it barely qualifies as a nervous system, yet their collective achievements often surpass those of more intelligent species. You notice how information flows through the swarm in waves, chemical signals, and pressure changes, creating a communication network that spans miles of ocean. When a jellyfish at the periphery encounters a rich patch of plankton, it releases specific molecules that trigger feeding responses in its neighbors. These neighbors, in turn, signal their neighbors, creating a chain reaction that draws the entire formation toward the food source. The process resembles the way neurons fire in sequence through a brain, except this brain is distributed across thousands of separate bodies drifting through seawater. The swarm begins to split into smaller groups as feeding opportunities scatter across a wider area, but the division isn't random chaos. You watch subgroups form along mathematical lines, each maintaining its own spiral structure while remaining connected to the larger formation through long-range chemical communication. It's like watching a single mind divide into multiple thought processes, each pursuing a different goal while sharing information with the others. Ancient Greek philosophers wrote about the wisdom of crowds, the idea that groups of individuals can collectively make better decisions than even the smartest person acting alone. The jellyfish demonstrate this principle in its purest form, with no individual smart enough to understand the larger picture. Yet the group consistently makes optimal choices about when to feed, where to travel, and how to avoid danger. Researchers still argue about whether this represents true intelligence or simply sophisticated automation, biological programming executing without conscious thought. The distinction may be meaningless when the results are so impressive. These creatures navigate across ocean basins, time their reproduction to coincide with optimal conditions, and coordinate feeding strategies that maximize survival for the entire population. Whether you call it intelligence or instinct, it works with mathematical precision. You drift deeper with a breakaway group, watching how they maintain communication with the main swarm through trails of bioluminescent flashes. The light patterns carry specific information about location, food availability, and potential threats, creating a living internet that connects scattered populations across vast distances. Each flash represents a data packet in a biological network that has been operating continuously for millions of years, long before humans invented the concept of information technology. You feel the ocean around you shift as massive bodies of water begin their ancient dance, carrying you and the jellyfish swarm along invisible highways that circle the globe. The current beneath your feet moves with the power of 1,000 rivers, part of a circulation system that connects every ocean basin on Earth. These are the superhighways that jellyfish have been riding for millions of years, following roads that predate the continents themselves. The Gulf Stream pulses around you with tropical warmth, a river within the sea that carries more water than all the world's land rivers combined. You notice how the jellyfish position themselves within different layers of this current, some riding the swift surface waters, while others drift in the slower deep channels below. Each group follows a different schedule, the surface travelers covering vast distances quickly, while the deep riders conserve energy and avoid predators in the twilight depths. Temperature stratification creates a three-dimensional roadmap that only the jellyfish can read properly. You feel the warm surface layer give way to the thermocline, that sharp boundary where temperature drops dramatically within just a few feet of depth. Below this lies the deep mixed layer, cold and nutrient-rich, flowing in directions that often oppose the surface currents above. The jellyfish navigate between these layers like drivers changing lanes on a highway, choosing their route based on destination and energy requirements. Ancient Polynesian navigators developed sophisticated techniques for reading ocean currents, watching for subtle changes in wave patterns and water color that indicated different flow directions. They understood what modern science has confirmed, that ocean currents form a global circulation system driven by differences in the temperature, salinity, and the Earth's rotation. The jellyfish you're following have been using this system far longer than humans have existed, their navigation skills honed by millions of years of evolutionary trial and error. You watch as part of the swarm detaches to follow a deep countercurrent flowing in the opposite direction. These individuals seem to know something about seasonal changes that haven't become apparent to human observers yet. Ocean currents shift with the seasons as temperature differences between poles and equator change, creating temporary express routes that appear and disappear according to complex atmospheric cycles. The jellyfish time their movements to take advantage of these ephemeral pathways, arriving at distant feeding grounds just as conditions become optimal. The Coriolis effect becomes visible in the swarm's movement patterns as Earth's rotation deflects their path into gentle spirals. Water molecules, jellyfish, and atmospheric currents all dance to the same planetary rhythm, creating circulation patterns that mirror the rotation of the planet itself. You're witnessing physics in action on a scale that dwarfs human comprehension. Forces that shape weather patterns and ocean circulation affecting the movement of individual creatures in ways they cannot possibly understand yet somehow perfectly exploit. Researchers still argue about how jellyfish sense current boundaries and choose optimal routes through complex flow patterns. Some scientists believe they detect subtle pressure changes caused by different water densities. Others suggest they read chemical signatures that mark different water masses, following scent trails like bloodhounds tracking prey. The truth probably involves multiple sensing mechanisms working together, a biological GPS system that integrates information from magnetic fields, temperature gradients, chemical markers, and pressure variations. You notice how the current carries more than just water and jellyfish. Microscopic plankton swirl around you in concentrated patches, creating feeding opportunities that the swarm exploits with surgical precision. The jellyfish seem to know which currents carry the richest plankton loads and time their journeys accordingly, following underwater rivers of nutrients that flow between productive regions of the ocean. These biological highways connect coral reefs with deep-sea trenches, polar waters with tropical lagoons, creating a global ecosystem where nutrients and organisms circulate in endless cycles. The ancient ocean currents you're riding have carved their channels through liquid space over millions of years, their paths shifting slowly as continents drift and climate patterns evolve, but their basic structure remaining remarkably stable. You feel the ocean around you responding to forces beyond the visible world, as the jellyfish swarm begins to pulse in synchronization with rhythms older than memory itself. High above the water's surface, the moon pulls at every molecule of seawater with invisible fingers, creating tidal currents that surge and retreat in predictable cycles. The jellyfish seem to sense these lunar commands through their primitive nervous systems, timing their movements to ride the tidal express routes that appear twice daily along continental shelves. The lunar cycle governs more than just tides in this underwater realm. You notice subtle changes in the swarm's behavior as the moon waxes toward fullness, individual jellyfish becoming more active and responsive to chemical signals from their neighbors. Marine biologists have discovered that many ocean creatures synchronize their reproductive cycles with lunar phases, using moonlight penetrating the water's surface as a calendar that coordinates breeding across entire species. Seasonal migrations unfold around you with clockwork precision as water temperature begins its gradual shift toward autumn. The jellyfish respond to temperature changes measured in fractions of degrees. Adjustments so subtle your instruments can barely detect them, but which trigger massive population movements across ocean basins. You're witnessing biological programming that connects these simple creatures to the orbital mechanics of planets and the nuclear furnace of the sun itself. The swarm begins to fragment as different age groups respond to different seasonal cues. Juvenile jellyfish head toward warmer equatorial waters where food remains abundant year-round, while mature adults migrate toward polar regions where seasonal upwelling creates temporary feeding bonanzas. Each group follows migration routes established over millions of years, pathways tested by countless generations and refined through natural selection until they represent the most efficient possible use of ocean resources. You drift alongside a group heading north toward the Arctic Convergence Zone, where cold polar water meets warmer currents from the south. This boundary region creates some of the most productive feeding grounds in the ocean, but only during specific seasons when the right combination of nutrients, temperature, and daylight hours creates massive plankton blooms. The jellyfish time their arrival to coincide with these brief windows of abundance, their internal calendars somehow synchronized with astronomical events occurring millions of miles away in space. Ancient mariners noticed these seasonal migrations and incorporated them into their navigation techniques, using jellyfish sightings as indicators of seasonal changes in wind patterns and current directions. Norse sailors spoke of jellyfish swarms that appeared before favorable winds, while Pacific navigators used jellyfish behavior to predict the onset of monsoon seasons. Modern science has confirmed the accuracy of these traditional observations. Jellyfish movements often precede atmospheric changes by weeks or months. The connection between celestial mechanics and jellyfish behavior extends beyond simple seasonal timing. You observe how the swarm's spiral formations tighten and loosen in response to tidal cycles, the mathematical precision of their arrangement shifting as gravitational forces wax and wane. During spring tides, when sun and moon align to create maximum tidal range, the formations become more compact and organized. During neap tides, when lunar and solar gravity work against each other, the spirals loosen and individual jellyfish show more independent behavior. Researchers still argue about the mechanisms behind these celestial connections. Some believe jellyfish possess internal biological clocks that respond to subtle changes in magnetic fields caused by tidal forces. Others suggest they're reading chemical signals in the water that correlate with lunar and seasonal cycles. The most intriguing hypothesis proposes that jellyfish nervous systems function as biological barometers, detecting minute pressure changes caused by gravitational interactions between Earth, Moon, and Sun. You watch a spectacular display of synchronized bioluminescence as thousands of jellyfish flash in response to the rising moon, their light patterns creating underwater constellations that mirror the stars above. This celestial choreography connects ocean depths to cosmic cycles, demonstrating how life on Earth remains intimately connected to the movements of celestial bodies across the vastness of space. You find yourself suspended in a liquid universe where the laws of physics orchestrate a ballet more complex than any human choreographer could imagine. The water around you carries invisible forces that push and pull at the jellyfish swarm with mathematical precision, hydrostatic pressure creating three-dimensional highways that these ancient mariners navigate with unconscious expertise. Each jellyfish bell contracts and expands in perfect rhythm, converting the potential energy of pressure differences into forward motion through a process so elegant it makes rocket science look clumsy. Wave mechanics govern every aspect of the swarm's synchronized movement as pressure pulses ripple outward from thousands of individual bells, creating interference patterns that either amplify or cancel each other depending on timing and spacing. You observe how jellyfish swimming at optimal distances from their neighbors can ride the pressure waves created by others, reducing their energy expenditure by up to 30% compared to solitary individuals. It's biological drafting taken to its logical extreme, with entire formations surfing invisible waves through liquid space. The physics becomes more apparent as you watch the swarm navigate a thermocline boundary where warm surface water meets the frigid depths below. Density differences create acoustic barriers that reflect sound waves and pressure pulses, turning the thermal boundary into a liquid mirror that jellyfish use for echolocation. They pulse against these barriers and read the returning pressure waves like blind musicians, feeling their way through a complex symphony, gathering information about depth, current direction, and the presence of obstacles or prey. Bernoulli's principle reveals itself in the graceful undulations of jellyfish bells, the same aerodynamic force that lifts aircraft wings now propelling these creatures through their liquid medium. As water flows over the curved surface of a contracting bell, it accelerates and creates areas of reduced pressure that pull the jellyfish forward and upward. The swarm exploits this principle collectively, positioning themselves to take advantage of pressure gradients created by their neighbors' swimming motions. You notice how the formation's geometry changes in response to current shear. Those regions where layers of water move at different velocities and create turbulent boundaries. The jellyfish adjust their spacing and timing to minimize energy loss, to turbulence, while maximizing their ability to extract forward motion from the complex flow patterns around them. They're essentially flying through liquid air, using principles of fluid dynamics that human engineers are still struggling to fully understand. Vortex shedding becomes visible as trails of disturbed water spiral away from the edges of jellyfish bells, creating miniature tornadoes that persist long after their creators have passed. Other jellyfish read these vortex signatures like highway markers, gathering information about the size, speed, and direction of travel of individuals that passed through the same water minutes or hours earlier. The ocean becomes a liquid library where movement patterns are recorded in swirling water and gradually fade like messages written in disappearing ink. The swarm encounters a region of internal waves, those invisible oscillations that occur deep beneath the ocean's surface, where different water masses interact. These underwater tsunamis can tower hundreds of feet high, despite being completely invisible from above, creating pressure variations that would crush human divers, but which the jellyfish ride like surfers, catching the perfect wave. Their flexible bodies compress and expand with the pressure changes, using the wave energy to propel themselves across vast distances with minimal effort. Researchers still argue about whether jellyfish consciously perceive the pressure waves they're riding or simply respond to them through evolved reflex patterns. The distinction becomes meaningless when you observe the mathematical perfection of their synchronized movements, thousands of individuals coordinating their swimming patterns to create constructive interference that amplifies the propulsive force available to every member of the group. You watch as the formation encounters a seamount rising from the abyssal depths, its presence creating complex current patterns and pressure shadows that challenge the swarm's navigation systems. The response is immediate and coordinated, the mathematical spiral reshaping itself to flow around the underwater mountain like water flowing around a stone, maintaining formation integrity while adapting to unexpected obstacles with fluid grace. You witness something that transforms your understanding of inheritance as the jellyfish swarm encounters a group of juveniles, their translucent bodies barely larger than coins, yet already displaying the complex movement patterns that have guided their species across millions of years. These newborns have never seen an adult formation, never received swimming lessons or navigation training, yet they slip into the spiral geometry with the precision of seasoned travelers. Their DNA carries more than just instructions for building cells and organs. It contains the compressed wisdom of countless generations who survived by following mathematical principles encoded in their genetic memory. The adult swarm welcomes the juveniles with chemical signals that you can almost taste in the water around you, pheromone clouds that carry information about current direction, food availability, and optimal swimming depths. But the most remarkable communication happens at a deeper level, through what marine biologists call genetic resonance, where similar DNA patterns create behavioral synchronization between individuals who have never met before. It's like watching members of an ancient family recognize each other through inherited mannerisms passed down through millions of years. You observe how the juveniles instinctively position themselves at specific distances from adults, maintaining spacing ratios that optimize their access to the pressure waves created by larger swimmers. This knowledge wasn't learned through trial and error, but emerged fully formed from genetic instructions written in the chemical language of DNA. Evolution has spent millions of years refining these behavioral programs, testing countless variations, and preserving only the combinations that maximize survival in the open ocean. The swarm's collective memory extends beyond individual lifetimes, as navigation routes discovered by ancient populations continue to influence modern migrations. Successful pathways become embedded in the genetic code of survivors, their descendants inheriting not just physical characteristics, but also the accumulated geographical knowledge of their ancestors. You're watching a living library where information about ocean currents, feeding grounds, and seasonal changes passes from generation to generation through biological inheritance rather than conscious teaching. Epigenetic factors add another layer of complexity to this hereditary programming, as environmental stresses experienced by parent jellyfish influence the gene expression of their offspring. Jellyfish that survived particularly harsh winters pass chemical markers to their young that activate genes for cold tolerance and energy conservation. Those that navigated through polluted waters transfer resistance patterns that help the next generation cope with toxins. The ocean itself becomes a teacher, its lessons absorbed into the genetic memory of species that learn from every challenge. You notice how different populations within the same swarm carry slightly different genetic signatures, regional variations that reflect local adaptations accumulated over thousands of years. Jellyfish descended from Arctic populations show enhanced sensitivity to magnetic field variations, while those with tropical ancestry demonstrate superior ability to navigate using chemical gradients. When these populations merge during major migrations, they create hybrid swarms with expanded sensory capabilities and navigation options. The mathematical precision of swarm formations emerges from genetic algorithms more sophisticated than anything human programmers have created. Each jellyfish carries instructions for calculating optimal distances, timing swimming pulses, and responding to neighbor movements, but these instructions adapt and evolve based on environmental feedback. Successful formations reproduce their patterns more effectively, while failed geometries disappear from the gene pool through natural selection. Researchers still argue about how much jellyfish behavior represents hardwired genetic programming versus adaptive responses to environmental cues. The truth appears to involve complex interactions between inherited templates and real-time environmental processing, with genetic memory providing the foundation for navigation skills that individual experience then refines and personalizes. You drift alongside a particularly ancient specimen whose scarred bell suggests decades of survival in the open ocean, watching how younger jellyfish orient themselves relative to this elder's movements. The old one carries genetic memory, reaching back through countless generations, its DNA a compressed history of every successful migration route, every productive feeding ground, every survival strategy that allowed its lineage to persist through millions of years of environmental change. And following this elder, the younger generation gains access to accumulated wisdom that transcends individual experience. You find yourself witnessing the collision of ancient wisdom and cutting-edge technology as research vessels equipped with sophisticated tracking equipment converge on the jellyfish swarm around you. Scientists are using the mathematical patterns perfected by these brainless creatures to revolutionize everything from traffic management algorithms to weather prediction models, learning lessons from a navigation system that has been operating flawlessly for hundreds of millions of years. The swarm's spiral formations have inspired a new generation of autonomous underwater vehicles that mimic jellyfish swimming patterns and formation geometry. You watch as robotic scouts equipped with pressure sensors and chemical detectors attempt to integrate with the natural formation, their mechanical bells pulsing in synchronized rhythms as they learn to ride the same pressure waves that carry their biological teachers. The robots struggle with movements that come naturally to creatures possessing nothing more than a simple nerve net, highlighting the elegant efficiency of evolutionary engineering. Artificial intelligence researchers studying the swarm's collective decision-making have discovered principles that challenge fundamental assumptions about intelligence and consciousness. The jellyfish demonstrate that complex problem-solving doesn't require centralized processing or individual awareness. Their distributed intelligence emerging from simple interactions between thousands of basic units. Tech companies are applying these insights to develop swarm robotics and distributed computing systems that solve problems by mimicking the mathematical relationships you observe in the living spiral around you. Ocean modeling has been transformed by understanding how jellyfish read and respond to three-dimensional current systems that human sensors struggle to detect. Meteorologists now use jellyfish migration patterns as early indicators of climate changes that won't show up in conventional measurements for months or years. The creatures serve as living barometers, their movements revealing subtle shifts in ocean circulation that precede major weather events by seasons. You notice research drones equipped with bioluminescent displays attempting to communicate with the swarm using the same light patterns that jellyfish use for long-range signaling. The artificial lights pulse in mathematical sequences derived from years of studying natural jellyfish communication, creating a primitive dialogue between biological and electronic intelligence. Some individuals in the swarm respond to these synthetic signals, adjusting their positions and swimming patterns as if accepting the drones as honorary members of their formation. Pharmaceutical companies have begun studying the chemical communication networks that coordinate swarm behavior, hoping to understand how simple molecular signals can create complex coordinated responses across large populations. The jellyfish chemical vocabulary includes compounds that influence swimming speed, direction changes, feeding responses, and reproductive behavior, creating a biological internet that operates through dissolved molecules rather than electronic signals. The mathematical models derived from jellyfish formations now guide urban planning projects and traffic flow optimization in major cities around the world. Engineers studying the swarm's response to obstacles and resource distribution have developed algorithms that reduce traffic congestion and improve emergency response times. The same principles that help jellyfish navigate around seamounts and converge on food sources are being applied to help humans move more efficiently through urban environments. Researchers still argue about whether artificial systems can truly replicate the emergent intelligence displayed by jellyfish swarms, or if they're merely copying superficial patterns without understanding the underlying principles. The debate reflects broader questions about the nature of consciousness and intelligence, whether these qualities require individual awareness or can emerge from collective behaviors in systems without centralized control. You watch as satellite tracking systems monitor tagged individuals within the swarm, their movements feeding into global ocean circulation models that help predict everything from hurricane intensity to commercial fishing success. The ancient navigation skills of jellyfish have become integral to modern weather forecasting and climate research, their biological wisdom supplementing electronic sensors and mathematical models with insights accumulated over geological timescales. The convergence of biological and artificial intelligence reaches its most dramatic expression as machine learning algorithms trained on jellyfish behavior begin to exhibit emergent properties their programmers never intended, solving problems through collective processing methods that mirror the distributed cognition of the swarm surrounding you. You drift in the eternal twilight of the deep ocean, surrounded by a living constellation that pulses with the rhythm of tides and seasons, watching as the jellyfish swarm continues its endless dance through liquid space. The mathematical precision you've witnessed throughout this journey reveals itself as something far more profound than mere biological programming. It's the visible expression of physical laws that govern everything from the spiral arms of galaxies to the arrangement of seeds in a sunflower. These ancient mariners carry the universe's deepest secrets in their translucent bells, demonstrating through their synchronized movements that consciousness and intelligence take forms we've barely begun to understand. The spiral formation stretches beyond your vision in all directions, thousands upon thousands of individuals maintaining perfect geometric relationships, despite having no awareness of mathematics or central coordination. You remember the magnetic navigation from earlier, the Fibonacci spirals, the celestial timing, and realize you've been witnessing a single phenomenon expressed at multiple scales simultaneously. The jellyfish aren't just following currents or chasing food, they're participating in a cosmic dance that connects the quantum mechanics of molecular interactions to the gravitational forces that shape galactic structure. Each pulse of their bells sends pressure waves rippling through the water around you, and you begin to perceive these vibrations as a form of music, a symphony composed by physics itself and performed by creatures that exist as living instruments in an orchestra larger than any human composition. The harmony emerges from mathematical relationships embedded in the fabric of reality, frequencies and rhythms that resonate through multiple dimensions of space and time. The swarm encounters another formation approaching from the east, their bioluminescent displays creating a light show that transforms the dark water into a cathedral of living stars. As the two groups merge, you witness the mathematical principles that have guided your entire journey, combining and amplifying spirals within spirals, creating interference patterns of impossible beauty. The collective intelligence you observed operating within single formations now scales upward as multiple swarms coordinate their movements across hundreds of square miles of ocean. You notice how individual jellyfish that seemed identical hours ago now display subtle variations in their movement patterns, each one carrying the accumulated influence of every interaction, every current change, every chemical signal encountered during the journey. They remain part of the collective while expressing unique variations on the common theme, like jazz musicians improvising within a structured composition. The balance between individual expression and group coordination creates emergent properties that neither could achieve alone. Ancient philosophers, searching for the fundamental principles that govern reality, would have marveled at the demonstrations surrounding you. Mathematical constants made visible in living tissue, physical laws expressed through biological behavior, the seamless integration of matter and information that characterizes all complex systems. The jellyfish embody the intersection of science and mystery, their simple existence proving that intelligence can emerge from the most basic interactions when those interactions follow patterns aligned with the deep structure of the universe. The formation begins to disperse as feeding opportunities scatter across a wider area, but the dispersal follows predictable patterns based on resource distribution and environmental gradients. You realize that even as the visible spiral dissolves, the mathematical relationships continue to operate at larger scales, connecting scattered populations through chemical communication and shared navigation routes that span entire ocean basins. Researchers still argue about the implications of what you've witnessed, whether consciousness requires individual awareness or can emerge from collective processing, whether intelligence necessitates brains or can arise from any sufficiently complex information processing system. The jellyfish render these debates academic through the simple fact of their existence, demonstrating that the universe tends toward organization, complexity, and beauty regardless of the mechanisms involved. As you prepare to ascend toward the surface, leaving this underwater galaxy to continue its eternal journey, you carry with you a new understanding of the relationship between simplicity and complexity, individual and collective, ancient wisdom, and cutting-edge discovery. The jellyfish fade into the blue-black depths as you slowly rise toward the surface, their bioluminescent trails lingering like memories of distant stars. The mathematical perfection you witnessed continues its ancient choreography in the darkness below, spirals within spirals, maintaining their cosmic dance long after human observers have departed. You float upward through layers of increasingly warm water, each thermal boundary marking another step away from that timeless realm where brains are unnecessary and intelligence flows through simple interactions repeated across millions of identical forms. The pressure decreases gradually as you ascend, and with it the intensity of that underwater symphony begins to fade. The synchronized pulsing of thousands of jellyfish bells becomes a distant rhythm, like a heartbeat heard through deep sleep. Above you the first hints of sunlight begin to penetrate the water column, golden rays that will never reach the depths, where the swarm continues its journey, guided by magnetic fields and chemical gradients older than continents. Your lungs fill with surface air that tastes strange after hours in the liquid realm below, oxygen molecules that seem almost too simple compared to the complex chemical communications you witnessed in the depths. The ocean surface rocks gently beneath gathering twilight clouds, waves creating patterns that echo the mathematical principles operating in the darkness below. Somewhere far beneath your floating body, jellyfish continue their eternal migration, following pathways written in the ocean's memory, carrying forward the accumulated wisdom of millions of years, while remaining beautifully, mysteriously unconscious of the profound intelligence they embody. The stars begin to appear overhead, distant suns whose light has traveled impossible distances to reach your eyes, completing a circle that connects the cosmic forces shaping galactic spirals to the biological algorithms governing jellyfish formations. Rest now, knowing that mathematics and mystery dance together in every drop of seawater, in every pulse of every living bell, in the quiet spaces between your own heartbeats, where ancient rhythms echo through the chambers of sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.